Jesus.
But he's going to do a special workshop on Ebola,
Yeah.
and I'm going to let him take it from here. But thank you very much.
My pleasure. Hi, everyone. I am not, repeat, not from the Office of Science, Technology and Policy at the Executive Office of the Government. I just came from them, and they have asked me to chat about things. I am not from them. I do not speak for them, and they will be the first ones to tell you that. So, we have things going on that are really very unpleasant. In West Africa, as every person in this room knows, we have 3 countries profoundly involved by an epidemic of a filovirus called Ebola that is at the moment running about 55% fatal for those that are infected. Of those who do not get any treatment at all, about 70% die, maybe a little bit less. Of those who get optimal treatment, nobody dies. Right? If you can get the kind of care that can be offered in the West, you don't, by and large, die of Ebola. The death rate is almost 0. If you get the kind of care that can be offered in West Africa, optimized, maybe a third die. So, the president has decided that this is a fairly significant priority for him and has engaged all offices of the U.S. government, many of our diplomatic partners, and a number of NGOs, UN agencies, and international organizations to support the effort in response. That effort in response has resulted in a couple of things, one of which is a grand challenge. That grand challenge, which is being run by USAID and a couple of others, including CDC, the Office of Science and Technology and Policy, and USAID, is around one particular problem. We are completely aware, I promise, we are completely aware there's more than one problem. We got that, really. However, putting something together for a grand challenge is a complicated business, and we went to ask the people in West Africa what they considered to be their worst problem, and their worst problem was pretty clear. They have had about 700 medical providers catch Ebola. Of those, about 350 have died. Most people who provide medical care in West Africa are not physicians. Relatively small number, actually, are physicians. Most are not even nurses or the equivalent of paramedics. They're the equivalent of community health workers. They are villagers, they are townspeople who know the people they're taking care of and have sacrificed themselves in the service of others. So, the priority for Médecins Sans Frontières, which has the medical lead for the past 4 months actually, in this outbreak, has been the care of the people who are helping them take care of the actual patients they have sitting in front of them. Not contact tracing, not communications in the strict sense, but the personal protective equipment that needs to be improved in order for the healthcare providers at the bedside to live. That way others will be willing to take over when those people get exhausted, get sick of other things. And so the first priority for MSF, and therefore for us, because we are supporting whoever has had the courage to take care of these people, is to get better personal protective equipment, safety and security options. Paul Farmer, the founder of Partners in Health, and by the way, the man who founded Partners in Health with him is currently the president of the World Bank, testified, Paul Farmer, several days ago, Tuesday of last week, I think, where he said these are the 4 things that we need in order to get this outbreak under control. We're not going to go too far in there, but what we did do is say, all right, if the focus is PPE, personal protective equipment, but we recognize, as we just spoke about in the last session, that none of these things happen in isolation. All of these things have to be interrelated. Everything has to be a part of a system. How can we improve PPE and the things that make the new PPE work? So, I sent that out. I'm a doc, by the way, for those that don't know. And the MDM is a master's degree in disaster medicine from WHO. The FACP is Fellow of the American College of Physicians. So I know nothing about engineering. I am an interested user of all the stuff that you people do. And please do it faster, better, smarter, cheaper. I sent out about 120 emails last weekend to my various networks. As is mentioned on the door, I'm also core faculty for something called Singularity University, which takes place about 15 miles up the road at NASA Ames Research Center. That is a collaborative effort between Carnegie Mellon University, Autodesk, Google, Cisco, Microsoft, and a couple of others. So what we do at Singularity, you can look up, singularityU.org, but that gave me a network globally that was fairly bright people, and they all wrote in because unlike what we've had for the past decade or so, where the US has been a belligerent in multiple actions that many people have chosen not to support or to have supported initially and then kind of tailed off their support over time, nobody is objecting to responding to Ebola except the fringe. And the fringe apparently can't do fourth grade arithmetic. So we're going to ignore them and we're going to pay attention to what's been done here. What I'm asking here is an interactive session over the next short while where I'm going to show you what it looks like to be there. I'm going to show you the things that were offered to me over the past 4 days that are both ready right now to deploy, or suggestions that people think we need to have, but they don't know how to do it, but they think we should think about them. I'd like to enlarge that list, and I'm going to show you how to give that list to the Grand Challenge people so that they in turn can give you money to do that thing. And it can be self-interested, it can be for your company, it can be something you've always wanted to do if you're an academic, it could be a research project for your graduate students. We don't care. We will give you money to do this thing if it seems to be a thing that is worth doing. So, and for those also that don't know, IHS is the company that I run with Alex Hatoum right over here. We do scientific consulting in the humanitarian space. We work in refugee camps, we work in disaster zones, we work in slums, and we can talk to you much more about that later on if you like. But first, some messaging. Doctors Without Borders said this: we are basically overlooking the fundamentals, and we would like to do the fundamentals better before we get fancy. And if we hear one more discussion of the creation of an app to fight Ebola, I'm going to maim myself, and it's going to be your fault. So, we had a meeting on Thursday, Friday, and Saturday at the White House, and hosted by the Office of Science, Technology Policy, USAID, CDC, and MSF. It was a room of about this many people, and we spent a couple of days talking with the people who are taking care of patients at the bedside right now. The guy who leads the Ebola response for MSF, Medicine Sans Frontières, MSF, is the Belgian doctor named Armin Sprecher, who first responded to an Ebola outbreak in 1984 and began taking over all Ebola response coordination for MSF in 2001, and has treated something on the order of 400 patients personally. He is the lead for MSF on the ground right now in both Freetown and Monrovia, and he goes back and forth between the two, and he is arguably the world's greatest clinician for the treatment of Ebola patients. So, with him in the room, we presented this list that I'm about to show you, this one here and the next few slides, and had him say, yes, no, yes, no, yes, yes, no, yes, no. Just a gestalt, I think so, I don't think so, okay? There were something like 105 suggestions that you're going to see in just a moment. I don't expect you to absorb them, but get an understanding of the kind of thing that we offered to him, and of those he said yes to about 28 or so. And I have sent emails out, in fact a couple of people in this room got them, saying the guy said that your idea was a good one. I want today, here, more of that, okay? On the list of things we put out for him, was we think these 12 sectors need to be looked at for the Ebola treatment units that the president has said he wants to have done. Now, he said that, by the way, about 3 weeks ago, and not only are they not done, they're not designed yet. Not only are they not designed yet, they're not sited yet. And in fact, there's some of the sites that have been proposed already. 5 of them are completely inaccessible because it's the rainy season and the ways to get there are 18 inches deep in red mud. We know that, right? Everybody's tracking that. People are trying hard. And by the way, let me offer an aside here. Nobody involved in this response, government, IO, NGO, UN, nobody's stupid. Nobody's inattentive. Nobody's deliberately overlooking things. Nobody's bringing in their agendas in such a way that they crush everybody else. Smart people are losing sleep trying to do this, and many of those smart people are experienced professionals who have done this stuff before. So, in the phrasing of your questions when you write out to the open IDEO site I'm going to give you, could you please say things like, why in the hell haven't you done this thing? For example, antibodies from the recovered patients. For God's sake, just do that. What's wrong with you people? Okay, hundreds of people are working on that problem. Part of the problem that they're working on is that, among other things, the people that have recovered from Ebola are not really very interested in hanging around to play. We would like them to be counselors for current patients. We would like them to submit their blood for antibody studies in the building of more ZMAP. We would like them to be wardens for 25 group communities so that they can go out and encourage people to alter their behavior. They're not interested. They've just been really, really sick and they would like to go home. So we got the idea that the recovered patients are valuable. The recovered patients have a life, as they would now like to point out. So my point is only that very smart people are trying to pay attention. Let's move on. So all these things need to be done. Many of these things are not done. They have not been designed in a coordinated fashion. And for many of the places where the 17 Ebola treatment units are being located, they have to be customized really quite severely. It's very different geography, it's very different microclimates, and it's very different transportation, communication, and water purification requirements. Also, the way that the hospitals have to be built are not what you would think. So, got those 12? Moving on. So this is what we put in front of Armand, and I'll show you some photographs from him in a moment. People wrote these into me, and I decided it was not my job to filter. Right? I have a number of levels of expertise. All my degrees are from up the road. I have a pedigree from hell. I was 9 years at DARPA. I was the fleet surgeon for 3rd Fleet, and I was the only person Google's ever hired as a CEO for a spinoff. It doesn't matter. It's not my job to filter this. It's the guy who knows the space's job to filter this. So I'm going to flip you through some slides quickly so you can see the kind of things that were submitted. Here's number 2. And there's only 3 of those. Here's number 3. TVWS is TV white space. And some of these things got repeated, and I decided they would go ahead and have their own statement because multiple people wrote in about them, so you may see them more than once. And then we got to the suggestions. These are the things that people wrote in and said, why don't you, why don't you, why don't you, why don't you? And some people said, you know, okay, as we sat around in the room. And the MSF people, I haven't selected out of here, but the MSF people said some of this stuff is very, very good. In addition to the doc we had from the Ebola wards, we had the trainer for personal protective equipment for MSF. I didn't learn until the end of the meeting that those 2 are married. They have different last names. They met at an Ebola outbreak. So the person who trains people to be safe in personal protective equipment and the person who is the clinical oversight for all the wards are together every night. She, the PPE person, is the one who feels responsible for 300 dead medical providers. She trained them how to use personal protective equipment. Something went wrong and they died. So these are intense conversations that are taking place in these rooms. Here's number 2. And as I said, just as I got him, I'm not judging him. I put him down as I saw him. By the way, this is important right here. Not only are we having people die, but right now it's been the rainy season for most of the outbreak. That's changing over the next couple of weeks, and the place becomes, I'm told, I've not been there, an oven. So the already only barely tolerable PPE, which after 40 minutes is resulting in documented heat exhaustion, now the complications for the environment become even more noteworthy. This is another problem. The hospitals in these 3 countries are now at about 10% capacity for non-Ebola patients. They used to be 110% capacity. There used to be people on the floor, people on the porch, people in the cafeteria equivalent, people on the back grounds. Nobody's coming to the hospital. So the gunshot wounds, the machete wounds, the accidental burns, the children dropped in scalding water, the traumatic injuries from motor vehicle accidents, the 4th-degree lacerations for those people that know something about childbirth, they're not getting treated. Maybe somebody can pay money for a doc to come from the hospital to treat them in the house, but by and large, we're watching an increase in the non-Ebola death rate from completely preventable illnesses and injuries. Here's 3. It turns out that, as you may know, Guinea and Sierra Leone are French-speaking countries. That apparently has caught a few people by surprise. Why on earth don't they speak English? The Liberians do speak English, and they are Christians. What a win. So the United States has chosen to go into Liberia, that's the country we own, for this response. The Brits have chosen Sierra Leone. Sierra Leone is a Muslim country and a French-speaking country. For reasons we won't get into, the Brits apparently asked the Canadians for the 2nd Canadian Medical Battalion, which is located in a place that is kind of French-speaking, and 60% of the people in that medical battalion are native French speakers, and for reasons that are complex, they were declined. So, and Guinea, which, by the way, because none of you are completely up on your West African geography, I'll help you that Guinea is twice the size of the other 2 countries combined. Guinea is enormous and kind of wraps around Sierra Leone and Liberia. We don't know what's happening in Guinea. We have much less information about what's happening there than we do in Sierra Leone and Liberia. So we keep going. Cultural anthropologists and game illustrators. Lots of people talking about iconography, about cartoons, about non-verbal messaging, and about non-literate messaging. I'll just check. Does anybody in the room know the video game Gears of War? I keep getting that answer. Strong selection bias in this room. And at the White House, apparently. So it was Game of the Year in 2010. And there was 2 and 3. That absolutely stunningly beautiful game. I've now had a chance to take a look at it. The creative director for Gears of War contacted me and said, you get what you want. Tell us what messaging you would like. We will make it gorgeous. Just tell us what you want. So that's underway. And that is, that guy was first at Xbox at Microsoft and then was at Zynga, and now is doing independent contracting for something, by the way, I'll share with you, called The Other Dead. Brand new, introduced on the 1st of September, and it's all about your pets, wildlife, and livestock becoming zombies, but not you. And it just got picked up by Animal Planet, so you're going to see it again. They're volunteering to help. These guys, the no-touch thermometers, turned out to be very popular as an idea. Hexayurt, some people in the room know Vinay Gupta, originally from the Rocky Mountain Institute, later vaguely related to National Defense University. I think I'd probably, Brian, have Lynn have a seizure for my having said that. So, barcodes, scanners, yes, 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 yes. So you get the scope of the kind of thing that was offered already. Got that? Now, by the way, those suggestions, all this stuff in the little print, not done. Not done. However, if some of that stimulates thinking, this site is the Grand Challenge site. It's called openido.com, and you can see the URL up there because I was very careful to capture the screenshot for you. The person who is running that, Deb Pearson, is formerly of Investor Institute with Microsoft in Seattle. She's only been at OpenIDEO for a week, and she now owns this program. So that's openido.com, and you can see right on the screen that there's going to be an Ebola thing that's worthwhile. These are the 4 missions that are in the Grand Challenge. These are the 4 missions you should be applying to. The applying is incredibly simple. It is 1 to 3 pages to state your idea. If your idea is considered viable, as 28 of those 105 were, then you move into a funding process. And USAID is aware, because we told them, that their funding process can be very challenging for individuals or small companies. The documentation they have traditionally required because of the federal acquisition regulations and other things have been burdensome to small entities. The Global Development Laboratory at USAID just stood up a little while ago. They're the people that are taking responsibility for this Grand Challenge, and they have had permission granted to slash the documentation requirements and make it accessible so that people who would like to have a clever idea to pursue and need a little funding to get to a pilot or get to a prototype will have a much, much easier process of documenting what they've achieved. And by the way, that alone is a huge win for the developing world. We're now on Armin Sprecker's phone. He carries about 500 photographs of what he's doing right now to take care of Ebola patients in this case, Freetown, Sierra Leone. There is a World Food Program storage tent for food, bags of food, called a Rubhal, R-U-B-H-A-L-L, a Rubhal, out of the Netherlands. That's a Rubhal. They are using WFP food storage tents because they're quick to get them up, and because they've got mouse and other protections in a flat floor. What they then do is take pallets, perfectly ordinary shipping pallets, and put them down on that floor. Then they cover the shipping pallets with plywood, and then they put down mattresses right on the floor. That is your hospital. We're done, right? We can see patients in 6 hours from an empty spot of land. Really quite cool. So, and UNICEF, by the way, paid good money to make sure that it was their stuff that was on the floor. So that's a Rubhal, that's a hospital. How can that be improved? Note, the rainy season is ending. That is going to become an oven. So these are people that were brought in to the, is there anybody in the room who does not know the term makerspace? You're engineers, please, for God's sake, know this term. So the makerspace in Washington, D.C. is now a place called Tech Shop. Well, there are many of them, I'm sure, but the one we chose to use is called Tech Shop, and it's in Crystal City. And there are a number of them around the country. They're ridiculously fun. And they have 3D printers, they have routers, they have CNC tables, they have all woodworking materials. And somebody found this genius. I wanted to focus on her just for a second to give you an idea of who it is you're getting to play with if you choose to do this. She's young, as you can tell. I think she is still in her teens. She's never been past high school. She started drawing electronic circuits when she was 4 because she can just see how they would work. And she now is the Chief Technology Officer for a rocketry group in the Mojave Desert that is good enough that Burt Rutan, Peter Diamandis, and Elon Musk came visiting. So she has invented and built herself a 12 sensor unit designed to be attached to the arm of a healthcare provider in PPE. It monitors environmental and physiologic parameters, and there are kind of high numbers set for all of them because they will all suck. They'll all be abnormal when you first start, kind of by definition. It's a really bad environment. But there are extremes that begin to cause people to collapse. And when you begin approaching the extremes, it sounds an audible alarm. Remember, it's underneath PPE. So it's a pretty loud alarm. And it also is Bluetooth linked to an outside center where people are listening and watching, and they can spot that person is getting into trouble. Let's start the process of getting them out. Because the process of doffing the PPE, getting out of the now contaminated PPE is complicated and difficult, and at the end of your shift, you're exhausted and maybe a little careless, and hence we have patient number 2 in Texas. So she invented that with this person, that big. These are interesting people. This one is the one that's going to give you money. Anybody know who that is? That's Rajiv Shah. He's the administrator of USAID. He owns a $20 billion development agency, and he took the job about 6 weeks before the Haiti earthquake. He had actually come, yeah, exactly. He had actually come to AID as the youngest administrator ever. He still looks like he's like 23, but he's 50 or something. But he is former Gates. He was at Gates Foundation before he came to AID. And he's meeting Nathan King. Nathan King, and this is more kind of fodder for your thinking. Nathan designed in a 3-dimensional system that he runs in his PhD program at Harvard in industrial design, a 32,000 piece hospital for the developing world. Then all of those design criteria went to Haiti as a part of the Clinton Global Initiative, and every one of those pieces was built by Haitians using very simple tools and cutting, bending, scraping, filing, and assembling. I saw the video. It's just stunning. The thing that he was able to accomplish in understanding what could be done and giving an optimized medical center with stuff that could be started and finished right there on the ground in the town is amazing. And you see the look of incredulity on Rajiv's face, going, "You've got to be kidding me, and why don't I know about you," and that sort of thing. So, and by the way, he's a very quiet, shy, humble man who's grateful that he was allowed to be able to do something like this. So you definitely would like to work with Nathan if you get the chance. These are people who are watching these discussions, watching the young girl with the electronic device, watching the new PPE. This is Wendy Taylor. Wendy's the one who will be reading the submissions you put on the Open IDEO site. She is in charge of grand challenges for USAID. This is May Chu. She's Admiral May Chu. She is with the U.S. Public Health Service, and she is the President's Special Advisor on Emerging Infections in the White House. She was texting the President from this room, which I at least found kind of cool, but that's in part because I'm a huge fan of this particular president. This is somebody that you may know because she's from this neighborhood. That's Megan Smith. She's the new Chief Technology Officer of the United States. She used to be a VP at Google. I worked for her when I used to lead Instead, She followed Larry Brilliant into google.org as the executive director, and then went out and did larger stuff on the experimental side of Google. And she was just tapped by the president to become the CTO after Todd Parks, and she's only had the job for a month. I thought it very cool that she brought her kids, by the way. So, we're going to stop. That's all background for you. We've come back to these 12 sectors. What would we like to talk about? I ate about as much as I expected for that, and we've got time. What would you like to talk about for those 12 sectors? Who's got ideas, who glanced through those things, saw something that caught their attention, and would like to amplify that? Or would you rather just go up and go to the bathroom and just leave? Ma'am?
Is there a way to somehow categorize these according to like prevention, and so that we could think like more about that in terms of what of the 12 falls under a double or a triple impact for prevention as well as treatment?
Multiple impacts is certainly desirable. Simplify, simplify, simplify is absolutely a mantra here, along with reliable, 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 because it can't fail. Right? It has to work every time. We're talking about 747-400 level performance. It has to work every time. So yes, it is possible to look at those suggestions, but those suggestions are Eric's personal network over 4 days in people that happen to have both an idea and access to email and a desire to write Eric an email. That's completely inadequate, right? There will be thousands of good ideas that are out there that nobody in my world knows anything about, but you might. As far as kind of ordering those 105 odd
These
things.
12, I'm thinking.
Oh, those 12?
Yeah. Because they're all touching upon different aspects.
You may do anything you like. Absolutely. I, on the other hand, have to go back to running a business with Alex, or he's going to get really annoyed. We have a lot of contracts we have to fulfill. And by the way, nobody is getting paid for any of this. People who submit ideas to IDEO absolutely will get into a funding stream. But at the moment, everybody in that room had found their own way there at the invitation, because, I mean, frankly, when the president asks, no matter who he is, when the president asks you to serve your country, you come to serve your country. So there are a lot of people who are volunteering to support this kind of thing. That has to rotate because nobody can be tapped for too long. So that was a longish answer with several pieces. But of course they can be grouped in various ways and ought to be. There ought to be multiple impacts for every single thing we do in that corner. And by the way, it'd be really good if there's longevity there. One of the things that Alex and I just talked about an hour ago is the water system that we've designed that is intended to become a business after the disaster. We leave it there, therefore the cost is capitalized, and for a really small amount of money, and I mean in the low hundreds per year, a business can be generated by women that allow a bit of an economic engine, a little improvement in public health, and so forth. Those kinds of longitudinal benefits ought to be the civilizational donation that we offer to these very broken countries. So yes, anything you come up with, please have it be long-term, broad-based, and elevating. John.
One thing that's come out of my networks that may fit well with this crowd, people are asking for high-level contacts at the various telcos and communications firms in that region. And if your networks know people that get it and can act, that would be really great to connect some of the people who are trying to get some stuff done.
Mm-hmm. And for those who don't know and would like to continue that conversation, John, in a sense, in himself, is Harvard Humanitarian Initiative, MIT, and the World Bank. So I recommend a conversation. And there's more, yeah. Sir?
So we had a wonderful presentation last night from a company called We Care Solar. Have you heard of them?
We have not, I have not.
Okay, they have a portable solar pack
You know these guys'
has been
house?
used in maternity wards, and with great success, they've done everything they can to harden it, because they go places that can't get fixed. And I think that I will have them contact you.
No, please. I love you like a brother. Don't have anybody contact me. OpenIDEO.
Yeah,
OpenIDEO.com.
Yeah, okay.
Sir?
2 questions.
New
please.
Zealand Red Cross, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
2 questions, please, on PPE. First of all, do we know why it's failing? And second of all, the military have been heavily into PPE for 60 years. Are they having input in this?
Two very good questions. Yes, we know what's failing. And a part of what was described to us is the donning and doffing process. And we all did it, by the way. And she, the woman who's the PPE trainer, who's kind of bulldog terrier Doberman-ish in the way that she approaches this stuff, because lives are at stake, right? She's very clear on the way that you have to do this. We haven't redesigned PPE since about 1970, and most of what we designed PPE for was not related to environments like this, but rather operating rooms. Simple enough. There's an extreme version of PPE called CBERF. CBERF is, Brian and I know this group pretty well, the Chemical Biological Incident Response Force from the U.S. Marine Corps in Indian Head Island near south of Washington, D.C. I've worked with CBERF. I have been in their PAPRs, in their, I forgot what that acronym stands for, PAPR, but their personal something, right? It has the full biosafety level 4, but portable. So instead of having the hoses that you see in contact or contagion, these are portable devices that have very severe filtering, big headpieces, and they're basically in every important way spacesuits. They are power intensive, they are extremely expensive, and let me give you a figure. Remember that the people who are taking care of the patients at the bedside, the ones who are dying, not the patients, the providers, are simple people. And they're often not medically trained, they're often not very well educated, and sometimes they don't completely buy into germ theory. Right? There are lots of things that are in the culture that we're not able to tap very well. So whatever we're using for personal protective equipment has to be relatively unsophisticated. It also has to require no power. Because of the 17 hospitals that are going in, and of the 5 hospitals that are currently in use in Freetown, at the moment, all of the 17 and 3 of the existing hospitals have no power. They've got electrical generation from generators some of the time, but we cannot count, it turns out, on power. If power is a dependency, then we have a much more complex system for keeping people safe, and it won't work. So Armand was very clear about that, because we do it without power.
In fact, PAPR stands for Powered Air Purifying Respirators.
Cute. Okay, well, so there you are. PAPRs are out. So CBERF is out. But your root question was, do we know why the PPE is failing? And we dressed people in 2 different ways. One was the bare minimum, and it was acceptable and tolerable for a much longer period of time. The other is the safe. And among other things, the person disappears. I don't have my machine here. But we put them side by side, and we talked to the people who were in them, who are people like us who volunteered. Sure, I'll do that, here. And they were inaudible in the full safety, and they were unsafe in the minimal. And as they, under instruction, doffed their gear, the woman whose name I have forgotten said, "Contaminated. Contaminated." And of course, by this time, the person's getting very anxious and kind of stopping doing anything. And then they'd kind of step through it slowly, contaminated. Apparently, it's really very difficult to get in and out of this stuff safely, out in particular. You get hosed down with a 5% hypochlorite solution as you come out before you take the gear off. That turns out to be necessary for the people in the environment that you're coming out into in the warm zone. But it also sprays contamination in various places. Okay, right? And whatever it is that we've chosen to do right now isn't working quite well because we have 300 dead medical providers. So, longest answer again. All right. Sir?
Was there any discussion at that meeting about potential terrorist infiltration into areas of Ebola and getting purposely sick and then traveling into the United States or other?
No. There are certainly people who are thinking about that. They were not in this room. Ma'am?
I was wondering if there's been any kind of overlap with religious institutions.
You have a very light voice. I've been bombed a couple of times. I'm mostly deaf. Tell me.
Well, I was just wondering because from my experience in East Africa, which of course is very different than West Africa, a lot of medical ideas are kind of tied together with the church in terms of treatment.
With the church? Oh, okay.
Yeah, and so, you know, if you don't bury the body, you don't get into heaven and things like that. And so I was wondering if there was any involvement of religious institutions.
There is. There's a lot. So it's a multi-staged, authoritative, and collegial discussion. So the Catholic Church is involved. The other Christian and evangelical churches are involved. The Muslim imams are involved. There are a few Jews in the country. They're involved. And there are Hindus and a few others. Those authority figures, plus the chiefs, plus the grandmothers, plus the elders of the village, plus the men who have the largest families, another kind of authority figure. We brought in a number of cultural anthropologists, some of whom are from West Africa, and tried to identify every single authoritative voice that could possibly help us in altering behavior. Faith-based systems are absolutely a part of that. So is every other authority figure we can figure out how to use. And I'm speaking as if I know this stuff, but I've just heard people now describe it. I cannot testify to it myself, okay? So take what I say with a bit of a grain of salt, but I've certainly heard that discussed. Thoughts? Because I'm more than happy to just let you go and go submit clever ideas. Yes, sir?
I mean, it's kind of a separate topic from the PPE thing, but on your list of 105, I think there was only one that touched on diagnostics. And so how important in the room you were in and the general scheme do you think is investing in better, faster diagnostics? And are the health workers getting tested much more frequently than the regular population right now?
So the question is diagnostics, and are the healthcare workers getting tested frequently enough to make sure that we understand where they are in the possible infectious cycle? Yeah. So the healthcare workers are getting tested. We have diagnostic tools that are getting more sophisticated by the week. There's at least one that I've heard about that is 22 minutes in cycle. There's another I've heard is coming within the next 2 weeks that is a 10-minute cycle. There are places that kind of technology is not going to get to. Example, some people are, Anne-Marie Kimball from the Gates Foundation is the Director of Emerging Infections at Gates. She's a professor of epidemiology at the University of Washington School of Medicine. She and I work there together. We work at Gates together. She was in Mali. She knows the Minister of Health in Mali very well. They drove down to the border with Guinea about 2 weeks ago and watched the process, because everybody, of course, is watching an exodus. The figure that was given was 330,000 people on the move in these three countries. Either they are going from village to village, village to town, town to out, whatever. 330,000 people. Very tough number to come up with, but that's the working estimate.
That's kind of a daily.
What's that?
That's kind of a daily exchange, or?
People who have moved since the beginning of the outbreak, as best anybody can tell. And for all I know, that's an order of magnitude off, but it's a big number. At the Mali-Guinean border, what they saw was at the outpost shack, there was a barrier, vehicle barrier. About 50 yards on, there was another physical barrier on the Malian side. The cordon sanitaire is that 50 yards in between. The outpost here has no water. It's a mile inside Mali. It's 2 miles back into Guinea. So when these two guys come up for work in the morning, or the shift change, they bring water with them. Behind them is a tent. Behind them are 2 other tents. Every car that comes by gets a temperature temple swab. 101.5 goes into the back tent behind the outpost where they wait. Personal cell phone call to Bamako. Bamako sends somebody up with a blood sample and then drives back down again to run the sample. Meanwhile, they stay there. and their family supports them with food or water or comfort, whatever. About 4 to 9 hours later, cell phone call positive or negative on that person. If they are negative, they go. If they are positive, they go into one of the 2 back tents that are behind the first tent, and that's where they stay. There is no medical care, there's no food, they have to arrange for water to get there, and there they die, or they live, but there's no medical care. So,
nobody's allowed to visit.
I'm sorry?
Nobody's allowed to
Correct.
visit.
Once they're in that tent, they have to make arrangements to get stuff, right? And that, of course, becomes very dangerous for whoever's providing that, ordinarily a family member, possibly a religious person who's affiliated up there. But our understanding didn't go that deep. Apparently, the mortality in those 2 tents is very high indeed. So, diagnostics and what you do from that point, because if that person is positive, now what? They're not going to go into Mali. They can't go back into Guinea because they'd get into transportation where they risk having to have that car burned. We're stuck. So, knowing more and better about diagnostics, testing people before they get too far, coming out, and what's happening with the healthcare workers inside, because some of the people who are running away are the people that have been healthcare workers, think they might be positive, and are leaving before anybody, well, for all the obvious reasons, right? So diagnostics, we're very much interested in diagnostics. What else? So, Ed?
In terms of shelter, the pop-up tent for food storage, essentially single layer plastic looks like.
It is.
Absorption of insolation, the sun beating down on during the dry season. The oven that you were talking about. It turns out that there are white pigments which are in fact specific for heat reflection, not just light reflection, and they are 2 different things.
Okay.
I was going to get white pigment coating sprayed on my roof, decided it was too expensive right now. But from the point of view of simple lightweight protection, maybe 1 layer sprayed on, and a second layer of fabric, again sprayed with the same stuff, up above, so that there's air ducting up between and cooling everything down below, might be a way to minimize the oven effect.
That would be helpful. Now, the room halls are a temporary measure for something that turned out to be important. In this society, and I'm going to generalize here, I apologize for that. In this society, in this geographic area, there is a lot of superstition, there's a lot of witchcraft, a lot of sorcery, a lot of blaming things, not on germ theory, but on actions of other humans, malignant actions of other humans. There's also a lot of belief in ghosts, in apparitions. It turns out that in those facilities, and in the earlier facilities we had in March, where it was a walled compound in an old hospital, the patients would go in alive and they would come out dead. And when people gathered at the gates, worried about their loved ones, got a glimpse inside, what they saw was people who looked like ghosts. So, that started getting people who were working in the hospital stoned when they went home at night. So, cultural understanding, a bit of a gap, we missed that one. So what now happens, and what I could show you if I had a different system up, many of you in the room know what hurricane fencing is. It's bright orange, very light, very flexible, lots of holes in it. Hurricane fencing. You put it on poles and you string between. And we use it at concert sites and so forth. Now, hurricane fencing is the boundary of the hospitals, so that anybody standing on the street can look right in at a patient, right in at the care that they're getting, right in at the processes going in day to day. And we have left open in the warm zone the donning and doffing of PPE. So you watch people get into this clothing, you know who's in there, you know who's by the side of your loved one, and you watch them go back, get sprayed down, get out of it, and it's that same person. The hurricane fencing stopped the stoning. Now, the idea that we would allow patients to be that visible to the community surrounding them is just ludicrous. Right? I can't imagine the number of privacy violations that represents. On the other hand, people are not killing the healthcare workers, so that's a win, right? That's a good thing. And what we are doing now is reassuring people, and we have worked out privacy measures for those moments when there needs to be privacy around that bed, and then those curtains go away. And they never leave the room, they never leave the hot zone. Brian?
Was there any discussion of personal cooling devices? Polar Products makes some really cool products that stay cold for 24 hours without connecting to any systems.
Cool.
Underneath
Sorry, so to speak.
PPE.
There were a lot of discussions of cooling vests, for example, but those all required power. I didn't hear anybody who was talking about the kind of thing that would just be chilled somewhere and then put in like ballistic plates in 3A armor. Not a bad thought. I don't think anybody has done that. And it's a worthwhile submission going out, particularly if it's a technique for chilling it that requires minimal power. Remember, the water system that Alex and I use is 570 watts. That's the level of thing you can do with a couple of solar panels and a 12-volt car battery. So that's the level of power provisioning we'd like to think about. What else? Sir?
So, are glucose packs up there?
No. Nobody mentioned glucose packs.
Okay.
What are you thinking about for them?
I know a guy that has, basically they're dehydrated glucose packs. If you can get purified water into them, and you would maybe have some like solar powered ultraviolet water purification scheme. You put the water in there, then you can give people glucose packs.
Not a bad thought. OpenIDEO.com.
I'd
New
like to
Zealand.
add to that I think the US military use osmosis. So you've got your concentrated glucose on one side, dirty water on the other. It actually goes through the membrane to dilute the glucose.
True. HTI makes packs like that too, but they also include the salts. And each of those is an osmotic draw, so increases the rate of membrane transference. So yes, true. And in fact, the Royal Air Force is using those packs as flat little nothings underneath the pilot's ejection seat. And it will actually desalinate water, but it takes forever. But it's a technology.
Are you considering to use any kind of drone system for delivering food to the people?
Yeah, that's come up about 63 times. The drones apparently are very popular these days. Most of them do not have a great capacity for payload. Most of them cannot land gracefully when not accompanied by their owner, right? Who their controller is. So with a few caveats, they're a reasonable thing to do as what Brian and I used to call a force multiplier, right? The ability to do more things with fewer people. So certainly for observation, they're being used now in the potential sites for siting these 17 hospitals, trying to figure out what the approaches are in various ways, because satellites cannot get into the trees, and we need to have the drones flying below the trees, and some of the trees are very dense. If I can morph on that for just a second, trees are an issue in Sierra Leone. 80% of the country has been deforested since 1970. That's probably, at root cause analysis, something to do with this outbreak, because that was bat habitat. And we used to think that Ebola was had a reservoir of mountain gorillas. And it turns out that Ebola kills gorillas faster than it kills humans. The actual reservoir is probably 4 species of bat. And the fact that, as you saw in the movie Contagion, if you saw that movie, that was basically about Nipah virus. Bats are being pushed into human habitation and taking a roost in dairies, in pig farms, in chicken farms. Their bat droppings and their saliva from bites are getting into the meat, which is then harvested. Bats are a delicacy, where primates are core food, core protein source. Bats are a delicacy, and you can find them at any roadside stand. And it turns out that the way that they're grilled is not enough to kill the virus. So a percentage of people think that the virus is being ingested through gingivitis before it gets to the hydrochloric acid in the stomach, which denatures it naturally at a pH of 2. So that the index case is probably a 12-year-old kid who had bat about 3 weeks before as a special gift on his birthday. Out of that, we have 8,000 cases, 4,000 dead, and many, many more to come, guaranteed. John?
So we do a fair amount of work on UAVs. The use case that I think is going to emerge is likely communications relays.
Communication
At
relays.
altitude,
Okay.
in a controlled envelope, and be able to provide comms in that envelope. It will likely be a long endurance bird with a fair amount of payload, a fair amount of power. This is not going to be your typical UAV hand launch type platform. It's probably something at minimum stalker size or larger.
And John, you can do more justice to Loon than I can. You want to talk about Nigel and Project Loon for a minute?
Well, if Google released a lot more details, I could. But basically, dirigibles have a fairly high capacity, and we've been seeing more and more efforts to use dirigibles to create flow communications. The military used it to more or less good effect in Afghanistan. They tend to be tethered. They tend to have very high voltages to get the electricity up a pipe, and they tend to also have very high bandwidth. Many of them have fiber connections on that tether, so your ability to put up a 350-pound payload indefinitely and be able to use that to send signals is a capacity that we can use as an engineering challenge for how to use that type of platform. Google has Loon. NavAir also has a number of dirigibles that are sitting in a warehouse. And that's a capacity that we could potentially put in there with an idea and say, if we had a 350-pound server rack with a fair amount of electricity and some power sources to tether and a communications relay and a connection to the internet, what could you do?
And frankly, I want that 19-year-old kid who did the little sensor thing to have a shot at that. Sir?
Yeah, so you mentioned that healthcare or anyone, as a matter of fact, who is treated properly after contracting the virus will survive. So, and I know you mentioned some of the cultural issues for the healthcare workers too. So there's that stigma issue. But is or can something be done to provide that care? You know, PPE is going to fail. So now how do we care for those who have PPE failures identified through diagnostics?
That is a fantastic question, and it's the one that absorbed the president a month ago. You might remember the first offer the United States made was of a 25-bed hospital to go into Monrovia in Liberia. That was for healthcare workers. That's for healthcare workers who get sick, because we think it's kind of unethical, immoral, fattening to not offer the people who are putting themselves in harm's way an opportunity to have all of the possible benefits of what we can do for them to get them past that, the consequences of their sacrifice. And I put those in slightly hyperbolic ways. I spent 25 years on active duty. This stuff matters to me. We have, at the moment, an idea being floated of establishing a U.S. helicopter carrier, an amphibious assault ship, as a civil military operations center and hospital 3 miles off Monrovia. And anybody who gets sick in the caregiver world, NGO, UN, IO, we have 12 helos on that deck. We have 4 what are called LCACs, landing craft air cushion, the big skimmers that can transport people. And those ships are designed to hold 2,000 Marines, 1,647 actually, Marines. Plus they have a 47-bed ICU, they have 6 operating rooms. At the moment, that is a contentious political discussion because a few members of Congress who sit actually on the Science and Technology Committee, but again, skipped some really basic stuff, are worried that we will have to sink that vessel after its term of service is complete a few months from now. For those people that are not keeping track, well, let me help you. This is a disease that is transmitted exactly the same way as HIV. There are people who recognize that HIV was 100% fatal. In the 1980s, I was at San Francisco General Hospital and at Stanford. Everybody died from AIDS. If you got far enough into the process, you died. That's not true for Ebola. It kills a bit more than half. Still horrific, but it's actually less lethal than HIV, and by the way, it comes from kind of the same neighborhood. All the lessons we learned from HIV, we can learn here. I was talking with a cab driver yesterday who was just ballistic about the idea that he might be exposed. And I said, how many people with HIV are in your cab each week? And he said, dozens. Right? Lots of people are on medication. Sometimes I'm taking them to the pharmacy to get their heart, right? They're highly active antiretroviral therapy. I said, those people are no more risk to you than somebody with Ebola is. Okay? Blood and body fluid precautions. Now, when they get violated, it's a much more aggressive process, so you die sooner and more spectacularly if you happen to get the hemorrhagic reaction. Not everybody does. It's a horrible thing to see. But HIV and hepatitis B and Ebola are all blood and body fluid viruses. They are the same kind of precautions. So the idea that we have to lose a Navy ship means that all those decades of chemical and biological decontamination procedures that we spent billions of dollars making sure we could do on every Navy vessel was apparently worthless. So we've tried to make these arguments. We'll see if rational people are listening. But the idea of an afloat Civil Military Operations Center and healthcare providing center has absolutely come up, and I know that went to the Joint Chiefs on Tuesday. We'll see.
Well, good, because it's important, because we're trying to engage.
We who? I'm sorry.
We're a faith-based NGO to get into the communities. I mean, there's Doctors Without Borders, but how do we enlist the medical people to participate? This is a fallback safety factor of a risk reduction to help encourage people to participate.
Absolutely.
So that's what we want to be able to communicate, that there is activity going on in this.
Yeah, no, it's a perfectly understandable position. And yes, we do need to be able to make that promise. And I do not, have I said 7 times, I do not speak for the government of the United States anymore. But many people are thinking about that and recognize that's an ethical obligation and are trying to find ways to do it best. At the moment, I'll tell you that Mei Chu, the special advisor to the president, said we are going to put a 25-bed hospital in Monrovia, period. We may also do something afloat. We may also do something in Freetown and Conakry and elsewhere, but there will be a 25-bed Western standard healthcare facility that is designed to be left and a resource for the nation and the region after all this is over. But it's going in.
Sorry, I missed part of your talk.
I'm sorry?
I'm sorry, I missed part of your talk. You said Liberia. Are you just doing this in Monrovia area or Maryland area? Are you also doing it in Hong Kong?
Good for you. The 17 ETUs, the Ebola treatment units, the 17 are all through. There are, I think, a total of 5 physically located inside the capital city in Monrovia. And none of the 17 are anywhere outside of Liberia because that is somebody else's responsibility.
No,
The Brits...
I lived in Liberia for 12 years.
Yeah.
So there's areas of Liberia which are not easily reachable.
Right. Right. We had that discussion earlier about the 17 ETUs, 5 of which are currently inaccessible at the end of the rainy season. Right? It's 18 inches of red mud and nobody can get there from here. And even the helo drops are difficult. And right now only airdrops are going into the immediate region for beginnings of PPE and so personal protective equipment and so forth. So it is going throughout Liberia, and it's being driven by the caseloads. It's not being driven by geography or transportation or anything else. Where the patients are is where these ETUs are going. There are 100 beds each, which is much more than most community hospitals in the United States. That's a fantastic logistical support problem. And at the moment, we do not quite know how to provide all of those things for a 100-bed hospital in the middle of nowhere. Medical resupply, staffing, power, clean water, not completely understood in each location quite yet. And by the way, if you have a lot of experience in Liberia, you should be chatting with some people. Just tell them on openido.com who you are. You missed some of the stuff. That's all right. We have. There we are. So we have this. Oh, come on now, man. That OpenIDEO.com. Yeah, IDEO is a design and marketing firm. They invented, for example, the Apple mouse. They're quite cool. So if you go to there, you'll see that they have four different missions that they're doing for this grand challenge. Please go to this one, surprise us, and say, I know Liberia, because it's a very small number of people who do, and the people that do are busy, and they would probably appreciate a little help. I think I'm supposed to stop. This might actually be somebody who is
Well, we don't have any
yelling at me.
after you, so please continue this discussion as long as you guys would like.
Okay,
Very much.
but from this point, we're on casual time. Not that it's been all that rigorous. Please, any other thoughts? Sir?
Can you tell us what the virus is actually susceptible to? For example, is natural sunlight lethal to it?
Yeah, we asked quite a bit about that, because one of the things that we wanted to do was submit or provide a coating for the PPE, whether it was copper, titanium dioxide, a built-in bleach, sandpaper, sharklet, right? All the kinds of surfaces that might do something to either shed the virus or deactivate it. It turns out that even though it's a filovirus with a lipid layer, lipid surface, is relatively easily denatured. There is a guy at University of Washington School of Engineering who has developed a stabilized form of HOCl, hypochlorous acid, HOCl. Ordinarily, that's a highly reactive form of a chemical compound that needs to be, it is a part of bleach, but the bleach is the stuff that allows it to stay stable. It turns out in testing that similar kinds of viruses, very difficult to do Ebola or Marburg treatments, testing, are denatured in about 100 milliseconds. That's good for me. I like that, right? And almost 100%. It is a lipid denaturing using the reactive chlorine atom, just like you would with bleach. And HOCl is safer to use than bleach and much less damaging to the skin of the healthcare workers that are getting sprayed down and coming out of the PPE. Because remember, yes, they've been sprayed down and they're doffing their PPE, but everything is now soaking wet. So part of what we're looking at is surfaces that shed the water so that there's much less risk of droplets falling somewhere unnoticed, carrying virus. And also the bleach solution that we're using, they're using 0.05 hypochlorite and 0.5 hypochlorite. I think that's correct. Depending on what state. I mean, one's for boots and gloves and other things, and the other is for the actual skin before you leave. And there's dipping tanks going in for hands and feet at each transition between clean, warm, many places are apparently putting those dipping containers at the entrances to stores, at the entrances to doctor's offices and other places where there's just a transition. You wash the way some people, grab the Purell at a doctor's counter or at the pharmacy. So does that help? Okay. HOCl, if somebody knows more about that, that's a guy named Dan Terry who is looking for various kinds of expert chemical support. Sir?
How long does the virus live outside a host?
If it is dehydrated, so if it is a drop exposed to sunlight, we're told it can last as long as 3 days, but it's ordinarily much shorter than that. Those tests have been very difficult to do because we thought that was a pretty obvious question, right? What kills this thing? Because it's on doorknobs. I have a photograph that I teach from sometimes because I'm on the faculty at the University of Washington School of Medicine. So we teach emerging infection, we teach critical care medicine, and various other things that are appropriate to that environment. But part of what we have just found from the University of Surrey in March is that we have fomites we had not known about. Fomites are Kleenex, right? They're things that transmit something secondarily. And what they did at the University of Surrey School of Medicine was collect everybody's cell phone and press it in agar and then just set them aside. And I have photographs of the nice outlines of dozens of kinds of bacteria. So when we talk about decontamination, we sometimes overlook a now ubiquitous bit of Kleenex that people have at their face constantly. Loaned to other people, especially in those regions, constantly. So that was something we hadn't anticipated, and one more thing that we need to think about in infection control. What else?
And in fact, another piece of Kleenex is paper currency.
Yes, that's true. That's true. Nicely documented. Those studies were done decades ago, and yes, dollar bills and the equivalent are just amazingly rich harvests for a microbiological laboratory.
So if I pay you $500 to let me over the border, you might be dying in a couple of days.
It's possible. Remember,
Yeah.
blood and body fluid contamination,
Right.
but if there is some way that that has become contaminated, at least for a period of time, there's enough on that bill to kind of support biological activity for a little while. You're right. And that, by the way, on the list of things that we talk about is incentives for those people that we think might be immune, right? If they have gotten over Ebola, as half the sick patients do, they get better and they go on. And on the list of things, we talked earlier about the fact that they're a little reluctant to do some of these things, but on the list of things we considered was having incentives for them to do whatever it is we want. And one way to do that is through cell phone-based minutes exchange or the actual delivery of cash to an account through a process called M-Pesa. M-PESA, which was started in Nairobi and has now kind of spread throughout the center of Africa. And it's just currency exchange by cell phone. So those kind of incentives are possible.
Has there been talk about the use of social for education in the surrounding areas not yet on the radar?
Yes. Behavioral modification and information transmission are large subjects. USAID has an entire section for that involved in this response. I don't know what they're doing, but it's certainly an item of great interest. There are signs everywhere throughout all of these countries, excuse me, and the surrounding countries. There are people with speakers walking along the street giving lectures on ordinary decontamination procedures, hand washing procedures, sensitivity to symptom development, where the nearest clinic is, and so forth. But part of the problem we're seeing with the clinics is that they are overwhelmed the day they open. That's also true for these 1,700 that the president mandated, because that came from a comment from Tom Frieden, the CDC director, about 3 weeks before the president made his speech, where he said, we're going to need 1,700 beds to handle these patients. Well, many of you in the room know a lot about exponential growth. And we are seeing a doubling every 16 to 21 days. And those 1,700 were appropriate 3 weeks before the president made his speech. And we need probably 5 times that now. Because the general figure is that we can get 70% of the patients under controlled care by, I think it's 31 December, we can break the cycle, right? It'll stop. It'll gradually get to an R0, a contagion factor, an R0 of less than 1, and will slowly burn itself out. 70% of the patients into hospital beds, when we can't do 15% of the existing patients with the hospital beds that are planned, we see the problem.
Divergence, yeah.
Sir?
This may not be so important at this moment, but as a lesson learned, does anybody tracks the identity and ethnic backgrounds of these people so we can see, was it in any way some ethnic minority population was or risk groups, populations were infected or kind of left out, you know, and it was particularly growing in this particular.
Now, it's a great question, and one that would easily result in riots and homicides and all the rest. But a perfectly good question, because, for example, the Iraqi regime under Maliki ignored a slice of the population according to that population. I have no opinion, I wasn't there, but that's what they say. And as a consequence, many things that were unfolding in that neglected and perhaps even oppressed population fomented in ways that were invisible to us. It's entirely possible that in West Africa, there are subpopulations that have been ignored, are ethnically repressed, are inadequately served with state services, and may be an exceptional reservoir of infection. Really tough problem, that. So I don't know. I hope that the cultural anthropologists and the demographers and the human geographers are keeping track of how to split that out. Surveys are turning out to be very difficult. You remember that Sierra Leone shut down for 3 days, right? Everybody kind of locked down in a house, and they had 3,000 teams that went out throughout the country. They found a couple of hundred cases, they found a number of dead bodies, and it was by and large a positive thing for them to do, because every single household that they knew about got a visit, no matter what ethnicity, tribe, color, shape, language, religion, nothing, right? Every household, every door got a knock. Hard to do that, but probably a desirable thing. Some people have proposed that quarantine is also a desirable thing, and that one way to break this cycle is to have the government provide food packets and decontamination packets for 21 days and go into lockdown. It would work. It would be phenomenally expensive. It would take a huge amount of behavioral modification and messaging from a government that is not particularly well trusted, because both Sierra Leone and Liberia have recently undergone horrific civil wars that were not actually simultaneous. They were they were staggered. So these guys came over here to escape the civil war. These guys went over there to escape the civil war. There's been an intermixing, and there is resentment, at least there, between the Liberians who went to Sierra Leone and the reverse. And in many cases, they're not welcomed back where they came from because they ran away in an hour of need. So complex, fragile infrastructure, not a trusted government, bad messaging, invisible process killing people. I spent 9 years at DARPA. DARPA hard problem. Okay, really very difficult management issue. John.
There's a couple other engineering challenges which sound simple, but might also be something to take a peek at. A couple of engineering challenges that sound simple, but might be something to take a peek at. A lot of these solutions are going to require power. Most of the way this is done in the humanitarian sector is we get a generator, and then we run an AC power cord, which is something that requires DC. And there may be multiple times that occurs. A lot of things that we're using, cell phones, laptops, tablets for doing work, are DC devices. But the simple solution of figuring out how do we get a DC power grid into something like that room hall so that everything runs DC, you could save 30% of fuel.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
Just getting something like an engineering, that's probably you could probably take your freshman class and do something.
Right, true. And another aspect of the power supply that people are now talking about is the entire marine community. The yachts, the small boats, the sailboats, the power boats, all of that is DC, all of that is highly efficient, it's very compact, it's very rugged, it is tolerant of water and so forth. So yes, the marine community is also being looked at for resources. The West is not used to doing a lot on DC. DC has its own kind of complications, but it is still absolutely, I think, worth pursuit. I think I'm going to, Ed?
Europe has large sections of DC power transmission. The United States, having figured out that there's about 1 to 5% of the power in the United States is lost because we have an AC transmission, is thinking of, has actually studied conversion of AC power in the United States to DC, high voltage transmission. And it turns out we've got now the power electronic components that can do that.
Can do the reversion from DC to...
But the utilities don't want to do that because they've got billions of dollars worth of investment.
Yeah.
Transformers and dams and everything else.
And we're working a lot on inverters that are coming off solar panels and microhydro and other things that are generating DC, going through inverters coming out as AC.
Because that's
and there's a bit of a loss there too, I'm told.
Yeah.
Okay, cool, good information. Noreen,
How is disposal being handled currently?
how is disposal being handled? So you might have seen, oh no, I didn't show you. So in the PPE, we had a woman holding up her hands who had put it on in the White House study. And this side was double glove nitrile. This side was a kitchen glove, the kind of thing you'd wash dishes in. That's what the burial teams use. They use the kitchen gloves. One of the interesting questions that has come up repeatedly and nobody can answer is, since many of these bodies, we ran out of body bags long ago and buried a number of people in mass graves that were not otherwise enclosed, what's the status of that land? If the water table is shallow, as it is in many places, and there are floods, what's the status of that water? Is that a nexus or another outbreak? So the burial these days of the patients that make it into an area where there is medical control is under a burial team in a body bag that is double sealed, and it is put deep in a trench that is lined. So relatively safe. But many of the deaths are not taking place in anything like that kind of circumstance. And nobody has done the studies to see whether, because nobody can, the soil is contaminated. The soil becomes a reservoir. It becomes a part of the flora and fauna of the forest. It leaches into groundwater. Nobody knows. Nobody knows.
Portable cremation work?
I'm sorry, what?
Portable cremation work.
Cremation is what they've gone to in Monrovia now. And the incinerators are in. They originally were wood, and the wood's gone. So now we're bringing in propane and other fuels to do the cremation. Everybody is pretty confident that the process of cremation completely eliminates the virus, period, end of story. But not all of the cremations are proving complete. And the ashes are not just ash, the way it would be in a Western system, and they have to go into a bag, the remains. This is already terrible for the families and the loved ones, and even the burial teams. And not many, so yes, incineration, cremation is the preferred method now. But logistically, it's very difficult. What's that?
Is it against cultural beliefs? Or?
We asked about that. We asked explicitly if, because remember the burial practices everybody talks about, right? The grandmothers wash and they stroke and they pat and they kiss the very bloody lips, and then they die. So our question was to the cultural anthropologists, is there a consequence for not going through that cultural practice? Is, for example, the next life of that dead person miserable because the loved ones didn't pay enough attention? If that is so, we're really screwed, because to have them change their behaviors and not go through those burial practices would be cowardice, having them preserve their own already aged life at the expense of an entire next life for this person who has died. That's a hard problem. And for some of the tribes, that appears to be the case, that there is an afterlife that is inadequate if they do not get adequate burial procedures. Very insightful question, and it has turned out to be a genuine problem. Sir?
Question, we've been talking about decontamination with hypochloric acid. Have people thought about using proteases, protein dissolving enzymes?
Yes.
You know,
Yeah.
a couple of hundred grams of protease on the body.
Right.
There.
So the question is, should we use enzymes for decontamination, proteases and other things, DNAs, gyrases? There have been a range of biotic options proposed that are less destructive than chlorine as an element. At the moment, it appears to be financially untenable. Right? You just cannot get enough of the stuff diluted to a reliable concentration that you can be sure that it's really gone. Because those trials would have to be done, right? And then you'd have to generate that stuff and distribute it, where chlorine, because of water purification, is ubiquitous throughout West Africa, easy to find.
I was just
And everybody
thinking
knows how to dilute it.
Proteases are a chunk of laundry detergents and dishwasher detergents and so on.
Mhm.
And so from that point of view, there's the infrastructure for producing in ton quantities.
I would agree. Yes, I bet that's true. Yeah, Brian.
Eric, how many healthcare providers, let's say in Liberia, are we talking? 100, 1,000, 10,000?
So we, at the moment, have about one care provider at some level for about every 5 patients. Those healthcare providers go through about 4 PPE changes per day. Each PPE change in current PPE costs about $60 US. A few seconds of kitchen arithmetic says we're going through a lot of money very fast. And that doesn't count the transport cost of getting the PPE there in the first place. The GSA schedule equivalent for the PPE is $60. How it gets to the other side of the planet is a non-recognized expense. So we're looking at high hundreds to low thousands of healthcare providers in the Monrovia environs alone, which is the dominant population for the nation of Liberia.
So there are those vinyl coated whatnots that are really heavy.
You're going to hear about hefty trash bags. You might recognize that yesterday Sierra Leone kind of threw up their hands and said, we can't do this. And they put out a statement in Sierra Leone saying, do not come to a medical facility. Stay home. We're going to give your household packages that includes hefty trash bags and kitchen gloves so that they can keep care of you, minimizing their risk. It's not giving up. It's just a recognition that the medical facilities simply don't exist, and they're overwhelmed on the day that they open. And right now, people are being moved through the streets in taxis, in motos and tuk-tuks, trying to get to some place that will give them care, and that contaminates the tuk-tuks. So the tuk-tuks are becoming Kleenex as well. Not so good.
Super job,
Right?
Thank you.
Well done. Thank you.